Welcome to Corner Fifth's Street Talk, where we unpack marketing strategies and explore industry insights and consumer trends in retail, fashion, beauty, tech, luxury, and more. I'm Arthur Zackwitz, content creator at Corner Fifth, and today we welcome Warren Shoulberg, who's a former colleague, mentor, friend, still friend. When was the last time we actually saw each other in person? It's been a while.
In person, yeah. I'm not sure we actually still exist in person, but
you're the avatar of Warren.
Yeah, but virtually we're good. So yeah.
Bring us to speed. When I worked for you, that was at HFN, Home Furnishings News, and I covered vacuum cleaners, and yeah, it was like how do you make vacuum cleaners sexy week after week?
Every week,
right? And so somehow we did it. We made it work, and it was quite a time. But so you were editor. Well, I knew you were editor in chief and publisher, or right?
I became publisher eventually. Really, just editor in chief for most of my time there.
And then what happened? So where did I went to WWD, and you guys were still around. It was under Fairchild at that time.
Yep. And when Condé Nast was trying to get out of the B2B business, they put HFN up for sale, and I tried to buy it. This was 2008, I guess, and put together some financing and almost got it. And probably that was the best thing that never happened, because all of this would have been right before the world crashed in 2008. And HFN lost about 60% of its business in 18 months, and it would not have worked out so well. It ended up being bought by another company, and I worked there for a while and then switched to another B2B publisher that owned a lot of books in the home furnishings field. And ironically, we ended up buying HFN years later. That was my third or fourth stint at HFN, and it just if it started with an H, I guess I was there. So yeah, but all ancient history. And then a couple of years ago, I left full-time on the staffs and have been freelancing and doing a lot of independent writing since then. Some speaking, and still focused on home furnishings, but more broadly the retail sector.
So HFN used to be HFN.
That's kind of where I am.
HFN used to be HFD. It was a daily publication. It was bigger than WWD at one point, right? But yeah.
Yes. At one point, it was the biggest book at Fairchild. We used to do, even when it became a weekly, we would do 200-page issues. And when I went back there in 2000, we had 35 people on the editorial staff, which is crazy when you think about it, because right now HFN is essentially a newsletter once a week and has no staff at all. No dedicated staff at all. So different times, but HFD was a powerhouse once.
Yeah. And it was part of, I guess, Fairchild back then. They had electronics publication. They had there was supermarket news, all of them. They were so broad and the spectrum. Now today we get our news quite differently, but I'm learning that, the content, there's still demand for content, even with generative AI, maybe even making it more so relevant, but it's the so-called newspaper, industry is not the same as it was.
No, it's not. But the need for that information and the information coming from credible sources, as you say, I think it's more important than ever, because you see stuff online and you don't know if it's true or not. So you really need the credibility of where this is coming from. So,
and speaking of that credibility, it's I was back in the 90s, I was a daily newspaper reporter, and literally, you would have a beat, and it was called a beat because you actually go out there and beat your feed to get news. And it was about people and finding the right sources. And one of the things that I enjoyed working at HFN and later, but not as much as the time I was there with you, was trade shows. And I remember going to my first trade show. I think it was the Gourmet Show.
Okay.
And it was in New Orleans, and I was mesmerized. There was so much going on. What was the other big show? The Houseware Show, of course.
Oh yeah, in Chicago, yeah.
But the Gourmet Show was funny. I saw Ron Popeil demonstrate he was there, and he was the famous on TV for the pocket fisherman and all these gadgets, right? So
he was great at it.
he could sell, he could sell anything to anyone. I'm convinced that he was so, because he had magnetism and he was so dynamic and fun. And then Emerald, that was the year that I think it was 1999. Emerald came to a show showing his cookware line or something, and he was another great personality. Another show. I think we both went to CES at one point back.
Yeah,
I forget when, but Sunbeam, and this has been, and Warren, maybe you could speak to this. Sunbeam had been touting their, the Jetsons home, the home with the kitchen of the future, and some of it came true, but I think we're still waiting. But that was an interesting show. I remember it's different now, and it kind of again, it opened my eye. It was so big that you end up walking through it, and it's like beating your feet literally, and then stuffing your bag full of press releases and swag.
Yeah, those shows. In terms of being able to get an overview of what was going on in the business, incredibly valuable to see the products. And even if some of the products were behind closed doors and secret rooms that you needed a password to get into, there was still enough stuff that you could see and have conversations with people. And that still exists to some extent. You mentioned the gourmet show, that's long gone. The houseware show still exists. It's not quite as dynamic as it used to be. Some of the bigger players have pulled out. And again, part of that is the distribution models of some of these products. You look at categories like housewares or home textiles. Essentially you got a dozen retailers that do the vast majority of the business. And a lot of it is private label or dedicated products. So that doesn't necessarily go through trade shows, but it's still important in the work that I do. I still go to trade shows. I was just in one out in Las Vegas for home and decor. It's valuable, and you never know who you run into in the lobby and have a conversation with, very serendipitous that you wouldn't have any other way. So, people have said that physical trade shows are going to go away and that this is all going to be done digitally and online. Within the home industry, there are platforms that are trying to do that, and there are some in fashion as well. But it's still largely an in-person experience, and that's really how most of the business is still done. So,
yes, we had Michael Appel on. He's going to be in one of our episodes here, and he's a turnaround specialist, and he had up Route 21, their turnaround a few years ago. But he worked at Bloomingdale's and Fortunoff's and other places, and he was a buyer. And he told me offline about the importance of trade shows. I think it was at the houseware show, and he sold cookware, and at Bloomingdale's, and he said he was just bored. Everything looked the same, and he walked. I think there was a commercial. This is way back when, maybe in the 70s. There was a commercial area, for kitchenware, and he saw Allclad, and he was the one. He made a deal with Allclad to create that cookware set, and it was like a set price, and it was exclusive to him. So he was the one, and it wasn't being sold at other retailers, but he was the one who brought it to Bloomingdale's. And as you know, Allclad became, it's like one of the top, kitchenware brands.
Powerhouse
right?
brand.
So it was Michael, but that wouldn't have happened if he wasn't physically there. He was just walking the aisles, and he said it was uninspiring. So I think you're right. The role of a trade show is important. Yeah.
Well, and if you go to those trade shows, you got to walk to the back of the hall and check out those little 10 by 10 booths, because that's where the next Allclad is. And you got to look for those guys. And again, you wouldn't have an opportunity to do that if you weren't physically there. So it's very important in my book.
I also used to go, and still even recently went to NRF, National Retail Federation. And you're talking about the back of the room. I remember they had the main area where they would have like speeches and, presentations at Javits. And I was trying to catch up on my notes. So I sat literally the last table, like by the doors, and I'm sitting there, and Kurt Bernard. I remember Kurt Bernard.
Yeah, I remember
He was
him.
an analyst, I guess, and a consultant, and very flamboyant. He would have a handlebar mustache, very nice suit, handkerchief, just a vest. He was just he was a hoot. And so I'm sitting there and he's like trying to talk to me. I'm like trying to work, but he wanted to feed me a quote. And then who else? And then sitting at the table, there was a man walks up. He says, "Can I sit here?" And I'm like, "Hey." And he had like his notebook out too. And it was Howard Schultz from Starbucks. He was the, it was the time, I think it was around 2000. He had left after doubling the size of Starbucks. He had stepped down. He ended up returning like in, I think, 2008. He was 16.
At least more times,
several times, right? As chairman with different roles. And so I'm just watching. I'm like, it was so, he was like taking notes and who's on stage but Arthur Martinez from Sears. So as he's waxing poetically about the future of retail, Kurt Bernard on my right trying to feed me a quote and Howard Schultz vigorously taking notes of what Arthur Martinez was saying. It was surreal. It was just a strange place, but you can't experience that serendipity, if you're not there, right?
Yeah. So. Yep. So, I think again, I focus a little bit more on the home category now. And what you're seeing is that a lot of the marginal peripheral shows, whether they were regional or a specific category, those have largely disappeared at this point. But the big ones, whether it's housewares or High Point Furniture, Atlanta Gift and Home, Dallas Gift and Home, they're still important shows and they've gotten more important. So you've just had consolidation in shows as you've had in every other part of the business.
So that's the other question I hope you'd spend some time on is where does, is there innovation in home still? Like what's driving innovation, do you think, in the home goods sector?
The answer to your first question is no, there is no one. And I think that answers the second question too. Yeah, I think, they don't know what to do. If you have a blender and you put 11 speeds on it versus 10, in true Spinal Tap style, it doesn't mean much. A lot of the folks that had electric products have tried to integrate AI or the internet into it. I remember one of the big refrigerator guys, and I don't know if I think it was Samsung, put a TV screen on the front door of their refrigerator. And you say, wow, that's really cool. But, who sits in front of their refrigerator and watches TV? It just doesn't happen. And some of them have set up cameras so you can look into the refrigerator and see what's there. You don't have to open the door, but come on, huh? So, a lot of these things are answers in search of a question. So, I think you're just not seeing it. And you're seeing it in soft home too. Bedding guys have tried to create sheets and that have sleep monitors on them and can tell you how you slept and what your body temperature is. And I don't know. I just want to go to sleep. I don't really want to know what my temperature was. So that's a problem. There's just only so much you could do with some of this. And excuse me.
Yeah, have a drink. That helps.
Yeah. It's iced tea. Trust me.
What about design? Like I remember back in the day, I remember Michael Graves being at like Target. And then that was like the beginning of like collaborations. Does that help? Does that, does that work anymore?
It's still important, I think, when you attach a well-known name to a product. The product has to be good to begin with, whether it's a design product or a functional product. It's got to be good. But the more recent brand names or celebrity names that are being attached to it tend to be influencers or people from HGTV. And it's limited to a certain extent on what their draw is. But then you have, again, we're first more to home. You've got Chip and Joanna Gaines at Magnolia Home, which came out of nowhere on HGTV. And that's one of the most powerful brands around right now. They do their own stuff. They're at Target. They have their own stores. So some of that is very impactful. And don't get me started on Martha Stewart. She's she seems to keep coming back. Just when you think Miss Martha is counted out, she comes back, and God, she's putting her name on anything that's not nailed down right now.
Well,
and her handlers are,
back in the day, I had an experience with Martha Stewart, and it was this is way back when she had there was Martha Stewart on the Omni Media Company, whatever. But she was like partnering with different. She had like a paint line, I think, with Lowe's, and then she got a deal for also paint at, I think, Kmart. And so I'm interviewing her, and I asked, I said, do you think Kmart's upset that you got this deal with Lowe's because your name is on both? And she pinched my arm.
Yeah.
She gave me a bruise, like pinched me.
Really?
It was she was smiling and very friendly, but when I asked that question, she didn't. She got she didn't like it. So she's quite a personality, and
you're lucky she didn't. Yeah,
I am lucky.
She is lucky it didn't go elsewhere. Yeah, but it's a very strong brand. You mentioned Kmart. When she did the Martha Stewart home for Kmart in the I guess early 90s, it was the biggest private label brand in the history of home furnishings. It was almost $1 billion at retail, and that's $1 billion in 1992 dollars. So very powerful. And now she's all over the place. Just, I'm a little disturbed when she hooks up with Snoop Dogg. I think that's a little much, but I don't know. Just opened a store in Dubai with her under her name. And again, the folks that own her brand now have done a great job building it out.
So last question, we just have a couple of minutes left, but I just want to get your perspective on, like, I guess the future of home goods. Like, where is it heading? Like, what is the, I know it's gone through several life cycles and changes, but still really the same, right? It's about, it's transactional retail, good design, good products.
Yeah.
Is it going to stay the same? Do you see it evolving at all?
Well, I think, the functional products, whether it's a toaster oven or a frying pan or a pillow you sleep on, those are things people are always going to need. That's not going away. So that stuff will remain. The distribution of the products is evolving, depending on the individual category. Anywhere from 18 to 20% of it is sold online. If somebody's buying a set of sheets, they often want to just go into a store and feel it. And that's not going away. So home stuff, unlike 8-track tape cassettes or payphones, are always going to be around. People, as long as they sleep in beds and need something to dry off after a shower and need to scramble eggs, those products are sticking around.
Okay. Well, we're out of time. Warren, thank you so much. Great catching up with you. We'll have to have you back maybe around the holidays.
Always good.
Yeah. So thanks again, and thanks for tuning in. Thank you.
Thanks, Arthur. Take care.